Norm, Is That You is the sixth episode of the seventh season of Cheers. This is directed, of course, by the wonderful James Burrows. And as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. It's a solid episode. I don't like the story focusing on Rebecca because I find it really uncomfortable. But the rest of it, absolutely loved. It starts off with Carla on the phone to Eddie. He's trying to find something because he wants to take the twins for a walk. And when Carla comes off the phone, Cliff suggests it's the shoes he's looking for. Turns out it's the twins he's looking for. It's really nice to see Carla and Cliff interacting without Carla insulting Cliff. However, we do get a little bit of that later on. Rebecca then walks into the bar and a customer accidentally bumps into her. He apologises and asks her when her baby's due. And my first thought was, what are you talking about? Yes, she's very baggily dressed. That's not a phrase. She's wearing a lot of baggy clothing, but at no point would anybody look at her and think that she was expecting a baby. And I didn't like this part of the narrative at all. And we do come back to that in a little bit. We get a tiny bit of comedy out of it, at least what I think is funny, but it's kind of secondary to that part of the narrative, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Norm is painting at Frasier and Lilith's, and we're actually in the apartment a good amount of time. It's a really nice space, very cluttered, very busy, but a nice space. And they actually have a designer there called Yvonne, played by BJ Turner. And Frasier and Lilith don't like his very direct, blunt, quite frankly, negative approach to things. So they decide to get rid of him. And Frasier suggests they decorate the apartment themselves. They very quickly realise they're not the ones for the job. And Norm moves a chair so he can get access to another part of the room for decorating. And Lilith loves it. She loves what Norm did. And Norm then starts to give all of these ideas for things to do in the apartment. And honestly, half the time I've got no idea what he's talking about because I don't do interior design. And they decide to hire Norm for the job. And I love that. Norm doesn't love it, but we'll come back to that. But I love the fact that Norm's getting an opportunity to do something he's good at, obviously getting an opportunity for money. And I feel like it's been a while since we had a Norm-centric story, so I'm pretty happy. We're then back at Cheers, and Woody gets some brownies from his aunt, with a tragic tale to go with it. Rebecca then comes in, and Sam says to her, a moment on the lips, a lifetime on the hips, suggesting that she's too big to have a brownie, which I absolutely hate. And Carla then asks Woody a Cliff Clavin brain question, which I have to say, they didn't milk this too much. It comes up again a couple more times, and I feel like they got just enough out of it that the comedy with it was perfect. And we'll talk about that again in a little bit. Frasier and Lilith then come in and they talk across the bar to Norm, and Norm responds, "Are you speaking to another Norm, or do you have a death wish?" Clearly Norm doesn't want people to know that he's doing this decorating, that he's good at this, and he explains to them, "Any more of this interior decorating junk could really eat into my reputation as a lazy, beer-guzzling lump of mashed potatoes." I think that's an absolutely brilliant description. Just a lump of mashed potatoes. I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty fun. And they then offer him a chance to decorate a friend of a friend's apartment, and Norm obviously initially isn't interested until Frasier mentioned that it would be a 5-figure payment. And Norm calls Lilith Elvira to get her to stop talking. So that amused me a lot as well. We then cut to the meeting with these friends. This is Kim and Robert Cooperman, played by Jane Sibbett and George DelHoyo. And they're very critical of Norm, even without saying very much. They're able to say a lot with their body language and their facial expressions. And Frasier takes Norm aside and kind of apologises because it doesn't seem like this is going to go very well. And Frasier points out that the Coopermans are the kind of people who like their designers to be stylish, which is the word Frasier used. And I think it was very clear what Frasier was getting at. Norm, thinking only of this 5-figure payment, decided to go along with it. We're then back at Cheers, and Woody tells Rebecca she's looking kind of puny, which Rebecca was very, very happy about, and she decides to weigh herself in the middle of the bar, which I don't love, but I did find it very funny when Sam put his foot on the back of the scale as Rebecca was weighing herself, and she chased him through the bar, and it was fun. I liked it. That's the only bit that I enjoyed from that part of the narrative. And thankfully, that's it. That's the end of that part of the narrative. The rest of it is playing out in Cheers. And Cliff is even joining in on the Cliff Clavin brain teasers. I enjoyed it a lot. As I said, I think they got the perfect amount from it without milking it too much. I was very, very happy with how that played out. Kim and Robert then come into the bar and they're talking with Norm, and they say, we've never been in a gay bar before, and the camera cuts to Woody feeling Cliff's brain, which was an entertaining moment, and they offer Norm double his rate to do another property, and then they reveal they want to set Norm up with somebody, and the only way Norm can get out of this is to say he's already with somebody. He's with the guy behind the bar, Sam Malone. And Norm drags Sam over to make him play along with this, calls him honey, he's hugging him, he's absolutely adorable. I was kind of disappointed in Sam though. Norm's face when Kim and Robert suggested they all go to the cabin for the weekend was fabulous. Sam, not so much. He wasn't a good sport and he was more worried about his reputation than with helping Norm out in that moment, which I didn't love. And Sam walks away chanting that he loves babes, and Norm eventually admits the truth. And he says, and I love this, he says, I think you should judge people for what they do, not who they do. And to be fair, I don't think Kim and Robert were unreasonable in their response that they didn't think they could trust Norm anymore to do the job. And then he said he'd do it for half price, and they were happy to go along with it again. And we have this really beautiful moment where Norm, after Kim and Robert have left, Norm walks a little sheepishly back over to the bar, sits down in his stool, tries to make conversation, and they start to talk about how Norm couldn't tell them. And he tried to argue his case that he's not gay. That's not what they were on about. Cliff was upset that he didn't tell them that he could get stuff at wholesale. And Norm agrees to get them stuff, and he tells them, but I have to tell you folks that I'm not cheap. And Sam won me back after his inability to help Norm out in the moment. He leans really close to Norm, and it's beautifully shot. We have Norm and Sam both in the foreground, and he leans really close and says, even for your lover? Which I just thought was a nice way for Sam, first of all, to say no hard feelings, but second of all, to kind of, maybe he realised he wasn't being a good sport for Norm and being there for him in the moment, when clearly this was something that was important to Norm. As I think it's fair to say Norm wouldn't do this if there wasn't something big at stake, that something big being a 5-figure payout. And I liked that in the moment. I think Sam won me back with doing that. It's a really good episode. We spend quite a lot of time away from the bar, but it doesn't matter too much. We do get a lot of fun out of the bar. Personal highlights would be Norm cuddling up to Sam. It was very, very cute. And the Cliff Clavin brain teasers in general, but particularly the moment when Cliff started to talk about it, particularly because he said, I didn't write it down, but he didn't say if my brain were. He said if Cliff's brain. And I really enjoyed that. I thought it was very sweet. And it's also nice, again, to have Cliff and Carla, I guess, playing together. It's very sweet, and I really liked it. And again, the intro with Carla and Cliff having a conversation. This is something we've seen more and more as the seasons have gone on, and I think they just built on it. On the flip side, hated the story with Rebecca, absolutely hated it, but Sam putting his foot on the back of the scale and Rebecca chasing after him, that was good, but the rest of it, not so much. Also great to have Jane Sibbett in this. I'm quite a fan of Jane Sibbett. So, in general, Norm, Is That You? Is a great episode of Cheers. It's not perfect, and it's very rare that I say that about Cheers, but nevertheless, still really thoroughly enjoyed it. Definitely has a lot to offer and a lot to enjoy.